ghost stories. I mean, come on, who doesn't love a good one? They're everywhere. Every culture, all across the globe, going back forever. It's this universal human thing. But what if the reason we all have these stories has nothing to do with actual spirits? What if it's something else entirely? Well, let's follow the clues and see where they take us.
And you know, this isn't just some old-fashioned belief we've left in the past. Not at all. A recent poll found that right here in the US, a whopping 45% of people believe in ghosts. And get this, nearly a third say they've actually had an encounter with one. That is a ton of people having these experiences. But here's the twist. This is Joe Nickel. He's a paranormal investigator who's been at this for nearly 50 years, but he comes at it from a scientific angle. And after all that searching, his conclusion? Science has never, not once, been able to prove that a haunting was real. So you have this massive belief on one hand and zero proof on the other.
So that brings us to the big question, right? If there's no solid evidence, why is this belief so incredibly common? Why do so many of us, maybe even you, have a spooky story to tell? Well, it turns out the real answers might be even more mind-blowing than any ghost story. Okay, so for our first clue, we're not going to start with old, dusty houses or fancy ghost-hunting gadgets. Nope, we're starting in a place that's way more complex and honestly, sometimes a little unreliable. We're starting right inside our own minds.
All right, let's talk about something called pareidolia. It's a fancy word, but the idea is simple. It's basically our brain's pattern recognition software working a little too well. It's why you see a face in a cloud or a figure in a blurry photo. Your brain is so desperate to find a meaningful pattern that it just makes one up.
And this is the perfect example. On the left, you've got the famous face on Mars photo from 1976. And you have to admit, it really looks like a face, right? It's kind of creepy. But then look at the photo on the right, taken years later with a much better camera. The face is gone. It was just a trick of light and shadow on a plain old rock formation. Our brains filled in all the blanks.
Now, let's add another layer to this. It's a system in our brain called the Hyperactive Agency Detection Device, or HAD for short. This is our deep, primal instinct to assume that when something happens, a person or an agent made it happen. So, that creak in the floorboards? Your brain doesn't just hear a noise. Its first guess is footsteps.
So why are our brains wired this way? Well, it all comes down to survival. Think about it. For our ancestors, if you heard a rustle in the bushes and thought it was a tiger, but it was just the wind, no big deal, you just get a little spooked. But if you thought it was just the wind and it was actually a tiger, game over. So our brains evolved to play it safe, to see the tiger or the ghost, just in case.
Okay, for our second clue, we're moving out of our heads and into the world around us. Because as it turns out, our own environment can play some really convincing tricks on us.
You know the classic haunted house story, right? There are strange shadows, weird noises, this feeling of dread you just can't shake. But what if all of that, the entire haunting, isn't because of a ghost, but because there's something physically wrong with the house itself? Now just take a look at this. On the left, you've got the symptoms of a classic haunting. On the right, the symptoms of low-level carbon monoxide poisoning. Seeing shadows, blurred vision. Hearing voices, hallucinations. And that specific feeling of dread, it's on both lists. The overlap is it's undeniable. And there's another invisible suspect, infrasound. These are sound waves that are so low, we're talking below 20 hertz, that we can't actually hear them with our ears, but our bodies can feel them. Things like faulty ventilation fans, rumbling pipes, even weird wind patterns can create it. And the result? Chills, anxiety, and that creepy crawly feeling that you're not alone. In fact, scientists have even found a specific ghost frequency at around 18 hertz, and this is where it gets really wild. That specific frequency just so happens to be the resonant frequency of the human eyeball. So when you're exposed to it, your eyeball can literally start to vibrate, creating visual distortions, shadowy figures in your peripheral vision that are not really there. All right, our next clue, this one takes us into that really weird in-between zone. That blurry line between being asleep and being awake. And it's a state of mind that can cook up some of the most genuinely terrifying experiences a person can possibly have. Just imagine this for a second. You wake up in the middle of the night. Your eyes are open, your mind is totally aware of where you are, but you can't move, not a muscle. For millions of people, this isn't just a scary thought. It's a terrifyingly real experience. It's a phenomenon called sleep paralysis. Basically, it's a glitch in the system. Your brain wakes up from a dream, but your body is still in the paralysis mode that naturally keeps you from, physically running around in your sleep. So you're stuck. Your mind is awake, but your body isn't. And to make matters worse, your dreaming brain is still firing on all cylinders.
And during this state, people tend to have hallucinations that are so consistent, scientists have actually sorted them into 3 categories, and you'll see they sound exactly like classic ghost encounters. First, the intruder, this overwhelming feeling that there's a hostile presence in the room with you. Then, the incubus, feeling a heavy pressure on your chest, like you're being held down. And finally, things like floating or out-of-body experiences. These are the literal ingredients for centuries of ghost and demon stories.
So far, we've been looking at clues that are pretty scary, right? But not all ghostly encounters are like that. Some are different. And our final clue looks at the deep, powerful link between seeing ghosts and one of our most human emotions, grief. Check out this number. Some studies have found that as many as 60% of people who lose a spouse or a long-term partner experience what are called grief hallucinations. That means vividly seeing or hearing or just feeling the presence of the person they lost.
And the great neurologist Oliver Sacks put it perfectly. Unlike the terrifying stuff from sleep paralysis, these experiences usually aren't scary at all. In fact, they're often incredibly comforting. It seems to be the brain's way of coping with a massive loss, kind of building a temporary bridge to help heal that wound.
And really, this gets to the core of why these stories have so much power over us. The idea of ghosts taps into 2 of our deepest, most fundamental human needs: the need to overcome our fear of death and our desperate hope that the connections we make in life don't just end. That's a really, really powerful reason to want to believe.
So, we've looked at the evidence. We've investigated clues from inside our own brains, from our environment, and from the depths of our own hearts. So I think it's time to bring it all together and officially close the case. Let's just lay it all out. When someone sees a face or a figure in the shadows, that's our brain's overactive pattern-matching software doing its thing. A whole haunted house experience? Well, that could easily be invisible environmental factors like carbon monoxide or infrasound. Feeling like you're being attacked by a demon in your bed? That lines up perfectly with the hallucinations of sleep paralysis. And that gentle, comforting visit from a lost loved one? That's the brain's incredible way of helping us grieve.
Which really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Maybe the whole time we've been searching for ghosts, we've just been looking in the wrong place. What if the real mystery, the most amazing, strange, and powerful phenomenon of all, isn't some spirit from another world, but the incredible, complex, and fascinating human brain that's doing the imagining?